Here we are. Caitlin Bacher, thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled. I don't know, I didn't say this in the depth of enthusiasm and excitement that I have when I was researching your company and learning about you and what you do and your approach to what you do. Caitlin's company is Scale with Success. And I am a super fan before I even met you.
Oh.
So we're going to dive in and we're going to go straight to the money. You know what? I didn't mean to say like actual money, but like we're to the money questions right away.
Yeah. Yep.
Amazing. Well, could you share a little bit with us about who you are, what your business is, what you do, who you serve, all of that?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Caitlin Bacher, and I help course creators get off the launch roller coaster so they can start generating consistent revenue by selling their course on autopilot. So I actually started out doing services many years ago. I was a social media manager. So spoiler alert, my very first course was about social media management because that's what I was doing. And then over the years, as I learned different things here and there, I've sold a variety of different courses. But the program that I am selling right now and have been selling for, I think, 7 years now is all about how to get off the launch roller coaster, start generating consistent revenue from your course.
Amazing. So I think you are a unicorn and you have cracked all of the codes that people struggle with. How do I sell my course? Why isn't my course selling? How do I properly launch my course? What is a course funnel? How do I use social media to sell my course? So just a few burning questions that I think everybody in the course space has had or currently has at some point or another. And I would love to start with, you talk a lot about launching and not launching. Let's dive into that. Could you share a little bit with us about the difference between launching and evergreen and all of those buzzwords and what they mean?
Yeah, for sure. So there's basically two main business models that course creators use when it comes to selling their course, right? One of those is using the launch model and the other one is evergreen. So when you're using the launch model, typically what that looks like is 2 to 3 months of intense listed building and content distribution, which is leading up to what's called an open cart. So during that 2 to 3 months, you're working, fast and furious on growing your audience, building a list, and it's all leading up to that open cart. Now that open cart is the period of time when you are allowing people to enroll in your course. Now it can last anywhere between 5 or 7 days. Then nobody can buy until your next launch, which is maybe 4 months, 6 months, or even a year later. And what most course creators find is that when their launch ends, so does all of the momentum that they worked so hard to generate. And then it's radio silence for your business until the launch cycle begins all over again. And I've found that this is a very high risk way of selling your course, especially for course creators who are making less than $1 million a year with a tiny team or no team at all and a practically non-existent ads budget. So it's my belief that if your course is generating less than $1 million a year, the number one thing that you need to be focused on is generating consistent revenue so that you can start to get some real traction in your business. So with an evergreen model, you're basically able to enroll new students into your program on an ongoing basis, not just once or twice a year, which is great because it puts you in a position where you can really grow and scale your business over time. You can collect data on what marketing messages are resonating with your audience, what needs to be refined. You basically have more opportunities to practice and get better.
Oh my gosh, I would love for you to just repeat all of that again for all the people in the back who aren't paying attention. What an incredible model. And I love that you quantify it. And, the first thing that kind of came to my mind was, wow, $1 million. That's a huge number. So you're saying I need to get to the $1 million before I can even think about doing open closed launches, which to me makes so much sense because let's be real, launching is exhausting. And if you're a 1 to 2 person show, that cycle is also, I think, not super sustainable. And there's, as you said, you put all of your eggs in this marketing basket. You're on Instagram, you're on social media, you're going live, you're doing webinars and whatever. And then your cart closes and the people who didn't buy hear nothing from you because you don't have the energy to keep up with both. So I love this so much. Go ahead.
And one thing I do want to just say here is there really is no one right way to do something. And believe it or not, there are people out there who love the launch. They love the adrenaline. They like it's working for them. They're all into it. But there are many of us who do not like that. And just like exactly like you said, do not find it sustainable. And for those people, this is an incredible alternative that can completely replace launching.
Beautiful. Do you ever encounter people who are like, you know what though? Like I followed this plan and it told me to do open close cart launches. And that's what I've built my entire course around. How do I shift that to be an evergreen experience?
And so here's what I will say. There are definitely people out there who, just like I said before, they're launching and they love it, right? I'm really not for those people. Okay. I'm more for the people who are, like you said, they've been told to do the open and close launch model. And for many people, that's all they know. They're not even aware that there are other methods out there. And that's what I really like to bring awareness to, because I think it's so easy as a new business owner to, feel very overwhelmed. And sometimes you kind of lock into one or two people to listen to for business advice because you're kind of trying not to get too overwhelmed. And that is okay. What they're teaching aligns with what you want to do and what you want your life to look like, right? And I think that that's really important because, like when it comes to scaling with success is different for each person. And success for one person might be building a $10 million business, having a big team, spending lots of money on ads, having everything evergreen and automated, and that's totally fine. Someone else's definition of success might be having a $250,000 per year online course business. Everything's evergreen and automated. You have a really high profit margin, and you have maybe a contractor or two helping you out because you're not really interested in managing a big team, right? And so a lot of times, people come to me and they're like, well, how do I do it? How do I get off the launch roller coaster? Da, 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 da. And what I want to say is, yes, I have a plan. I have, a path that you're able to follow, but you really, you can customize things so much, and it's really up to you in terms of how far you want to go, right? And like a lot of times I totally get it that, having a course that makes over $1 million a year, I totally understand that, especially when you're new, that's like, what? It sounds so unbelievable. But the reality is that when it comes to selling courses, you're not selling your time, you're selling content, and that content can be leveraged. So you're not working, one-on-one with people or anything like that. And so really the possibilities are endless.
I love that. I think there's a lot of, when people hear the 1 million, that like 1 million mark, that feels very unattainable. It feels very far away. And I think it's, how do I take what I have now as a new business owner, as a new course creator, and actually like conceptualize that number and plan for it. So what are some tips and advice that you have for people who are they're seeing a little bit of sticker shock? They're like, okay, I hear you. It makes sense, but I'm just so new.
And I think that's so important. And it really doesn't, it's one thing to have like maybe a 3-year vision or a 5-year vision. And it's another thing to have a 1-year vision, right? And if you are literally starting from scratch, maybe it's not the best idea to say, hey, 12 months from now, I want to have made, $1 million, right? But if that is within your 3-year plan or your 5-year plan, you can kind of count backwards, right? And figure out where you would need to be by the end of the year to make that happen. Now, one thing I want to be very clear about is that when it comes to, growing your business, you're going to encounter a ton of challenges, right? There are going to be public failures, private failures, mistakes. You're going to be learning things at a very fast rate, especially if your business is growing quickly, right? And I think that for some course creators, they kind of have this idea in their head that mistakes are a bad thing. Problems are to be avoided. And if they're experiencing problems, they begin telling themselves that those problems mean that they're not cut out for this, right? They make those problems, those unexpected challenges, to mean that you're unprepared, that you're not capable, and all of these things. And the reality is that when you set a goal that you have not achieved before, whether that goal is to sell one course or 1,000 courses, when you set that goal that you've never achieved before, you have no clue how to do it. Because if you did, you would have already done it, right? And so you have to give yourself some grace and realize that in order to get to where you want to go, the mistakes are not to be avoided. They're in fact required. And if you find yourself in a place where you are avoiding mistakes and avoiding failure, what you're really doing is avoiding growth. I was having a conversation with one of my clients just the other day, and I could tell she was kind of like, her energy was contracting a little bit, and she was starting to, she was putting things together, but she was starting to feel some self-doubt. Well, I don't know if I'm eventually going to be able to, reach my goals, this or that. And I was like, listen, are you playing to win, or are you playing to not lose? Because it sounds like you're playing to not lose. And if you're playing to not lose, you're never going to win, right? Because you're playing it safe. You're doing things, so you're trying to outsmart yourself and avoid this or that. Whereas if you're playing to win, like, you're going to get there. It's going to be messy. There's going to be mistakes, but you will get there.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think a lot of people in this space, in general, anybody who's living needs to hear that message. It's very reassuring. And it's one thing to come at this from a brand new space, a brand new business, a brand new idea. I heard people keep telling me to turn this into a course. So I'm going down that path, and I want to make sure I do it right. To hear that, like, you will fumble, and to utilize that to your advantage and to learn from those mistakes, I think is always a good reminder. And I imagine it may be even more frustrating sometimes to come from a place of, I have a course. I've been trying to sell it for 5 years and it's not selling. I'm nowhere close to the 1 million mark. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah. So there's a couple mistakes that I see when it comes to people who are like, I'm just not selling my course. I'm not selling their course. So a lot of times when I get into the nitty-gritty with them, I'm like, well, what does that mean when you say you're not selling your course? Have you literally sold 0 copies of it? Or are you just not meeting your goals, right? And a lot of times they're like, well, I've sold a few copies. I'm just not, da, da, da. I'm like, okay, so that's one thing, right? And what I like to do is to ask them how they are currently selling their course. What are they doing? And more often than not, while maybe you created that course 5 years ago, and maybe you're not, you're telling yourself or telling me, telling whoever, well, I haven't made any sales of this course in 5 years. If we get into the nitty gritty of it, chances are there are short periods of time where you attempt to sell the course, right? And you become disappointed, you become discouraged because it's not happening right away. And so you table it, right? And you go somewhere else to put out fires, you start this other thing, da, da, da. Then, a year later, you come back to it, the same thing happens all over again, right? And here's the big thing when it comes to selling courses is everyone is going to hit kind of this like invisible wall, right? An invisible wall where, you start a new strategy, you're really excited about it. You're like, yes, this, you're in the honeymoon period. This is going to be great. I know how this is going to go. I just hired a new coach. I just bought a new course. I just started listening to a new podcast, whatever it is, you have all the feelings. You're super excited, and your competence is not there at all because you don't know how to do it, right? But you are excited, and it's good that happens, because if we didn't have that level of excitement, we would never start anything new, right? The problem is when you're starting new things over and over and over again, right? Like new strategies, and you're not necessarily seeing it through. And so what I see happen for people who are selling a course, it's oftentimes that they're like, well, I tried selling it this way for a bit. It didn't work right away. So I didn't I took a break. I did other things in my business. Then I came back to it. I saw, I tried it this other way. But when you're learning something new, you're starting out, you're very excited. You know nothing, but you are excited. As you begin to learn more, your confidence actually takes a big dip, and that is normal. And that's because you are starting to see where your gaps are. You're starting to see what skills you haven't mastered yet. Not that you'll never master them, you just haven't mastered them yet, right? And as you become more aware of that, and you're like, well, hold on a second, there's a little bit more to this than I thought and as you're doing that, as you're learning more, your confidence continues to dip until you hit that invisible wall, what I like to call kind of like this valley of despair, right? Where then you're telling yourself, well, this is never going to work. This is never going to, whatever. And the reality is that when you're in that spot and you're telling yourself this is never going to work, believe it or not, that is a good thing, because what that means is that if you continue to push through and you continue to stick with it, even when you're not seeing the results that you want, you're going to come out on the other side and things are going to start to click. They're going to start to make sense, and your confidence is going to increase because you're then in a spot where you're like, okay, this was like harder than I thought it was going to be, but it's doable. I can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And if you keep going through, your confidence is rising, your competence is rising, and it feels great. And you're never going to get there if every time you hit that invisible wall and you tell yourself, this is never going to work. If every time you stop and then you start all over again with something else, you're just in this cycle and you never get that, like, all the benefits that are on the other side of that.
This is the pep talk that every entrepreneur needs to hear. It's like the definition of grit, right? It's that, pushing through those times where we feel very defeated. And I can imagine, I'm going to put this in air quotes. Failed launches are one of the most defeating places that any entrepreneur can be in, whether it's a product, a service launch, a podcast, a course. And so to know that you're here, first of all, to support people through this is such a relief. And to know that that's a natural part of this. And if you've gone through that, you're actually on the right path. Like, thank you.
Yeah. And it's just like, we put so much, as much as we tell ourselves, okay, I shouldn't compare myself to others. Like, as humans, that's just kind of what we do. But it's really important to recognize that, that person that you feel like is, 10 steps, 20 steps ahead of you. And you're just like, man, like, how are they doing that? Like, why am I not able to do that? It's important that you recognize that the reason why that person has more success is because they've had more failures than you. They've had more mistakes than you. They've done more messy things. They've just kind of gone ahead and kept going. And so if every time you make a mess, make a mistake, whatever, if every time you do that, if you're being hard on yourself, it's like a waste of time. Right. And you kind of have to come to a point where you make the decision that you're just not going to waste time beating yourself up anymore. Because the reality is, if you're really trying to grow a business, like, you don't have that luxury. And I will also say that, it's hard because putting your head down, focusing on doing the work can feel very lonely. Because while, you don't necessarily want to be a complainer, if you're out there and you're like, oh, growing a business is so hard, this is never going to work, guess what? You're instantly going to have a lot of people come to you and be like, I know it's so hard, like, it's this, that, the whatever. And temporarily, you're going to get like a dopamine hit. You're going to feel good, right? But then you're not doing what it is that you want to do. And when your head's down doing the work and experiencing failures and continuing to keep going forward, nobody's there to give you a round of applause. Nobody's there to be like, hey, you are working hard. Like, I really appreciate you, because you're the boss. You run the show. Right. And that's just the way it is. Like, if you're waiting for someone to be like, wow, like, you're awesome. I know you're, staying up super late and working hard and all this, then if that's you or that's your expectation of what's going to happen when you're building a business, you are sorely mistaken, because that it does not happen. But the cool thing about being heads down focused, doing the work, overcoming mistakes, is that eventually over time, you're going to start to attract other people who feel the same way. And being able to build a community of people around you who go through life in that same way is very rewarding, right? And you can lift each other up and all of that. But it takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. Community is so important and so powerful. And if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, that's me, I'm having a pity party, here you go. Listen to this podcast whenever you need to. We see you. Keep up the good work. It's happening. You're doing the thing. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I can even give like a really tangible tip for people to apply when they feel like they're in that stuck part, right? Because it's easy in hindsight to be like, well, just pick yourself up and keep going. But like when you're there, it is really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like bypass that or anything like that. But what I will say is one of the things that I've done a lot of research on is this concept of something called the drama triangle. And anyone can Google that and learn all about it. I have podcast episodes about it. I did not develop it. This doctor did in the 60s. But what I will say is one of the tools that people talk about when they talk about the drama triangle is how to shift yourself out of feeling like a victim. Not that you are a victim, but kind of playing the role of it, right? Like, oh, you sent out the wrong email. The world is not going to end, right? But it's easy to really pile on ourselves. And so what you really want to do in those instances where you're just feeling stuck and overwhelmed and you're in that place where you're like, oh, this is never going to work. What you want to tell yourself, what you want to ask yourself is, what is the outcome I want to create? What is the outcome I'm looking to create? And the reason why you want to ask yourself that is because it immediately lifts you up out of the weeds, out of the details, the muck that you don't even understand. And it helps you refocus on that big goal that you have, the long-term goal. And what's funny is if you it lifts you up out of the weeds, gets you focused on what you want. And the more clear you can be on what you want, your two things are going to happen. One, your brain is naturally going to go into problem solving mode, not in a stressful way, but in an inspired way, because you've gotten so clear on that thing that you're wanting to create. And the other thing that's going to happen is the more clear you are on that destination, the goal, you're going to be able to then look for people who can support you in getting to that goal, right? Because if you're just like saying, well, I just want to grow a business. Well, that is very vague. So, but the more clear you can get on what you want that to look like, the more your attention is going to be focused on, like, where are those helpers? Where are those people who can help me get where I want to go?
That tool, I think, is a really powerful reframe. I can't tell you how many afternoons I've wasted just being in, like, shutting down from overwhelm.
Oh, yeah.
And if, we have that tool to shift out of that a little bit faster, and like, it's all natural, it's all part of it.
Totally.
And as you said, like, we don't have the luxury of every afternoon getting overwhelmed by the morning's activities. And so thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Awesome. I would love to talk a little bit, or a lot of it, however much you want to talk about it, about sort of the marketing side of this and attracting people to your courses. We work with a lot of course creators who aren't sure exactly how to both dial in their, I guess, quote unquote, funnel, and how to really analyze it properly. Is it the funnel itself that's not bringing the people in? Is it the messaging on my website? Is it my social media? We have all of these things at our disposal, which is so great and can be extremely overwhelming. So any tips and guidance you have from that side would be amazing.
Yeah. So what I would invite people to really start doing is to think of everything as a system. Right? So a lot of times we get kind of stuck in this like linear thinking mode where we're like, okay, I will build my website. Now I will post on social media. Now I will create my course. And then it's like, and it's almost like nothing's working together as a full system. There's not like a coherent golden thread that is connecting everything, all back to the promise and the transformation that you provide for people. And I think that what we want to start doing is really thinking in that systems way. And so one example of that, and his name starts with Andre, and I don't remember his last name, but you can look it up.
It's funny. The last name that's coming to me is the Giant.
No, it's not Andre the Giant. Not Andre the Giant, but it's a marketer, and he coined this term sphere of influence. Okay. And so basically what you're doing is you are creating your own sphere of influence, right? Now, in this sphere of influence are multiple things because it's all a system working together. You have your website, you have your, social media, you have the sales funnel, the this, the that, the other, and everything is working together. And the way that people are making a purchasing decision is not always linear. They're bouncing around in that sphere of influence. They may be following you on social media for a while and have never even made it to your website before. They maybe don't even know that you have a free webinar, free lead magnet, whatever, something free that they can opt into. They may not even know that you sell something, right? And so it's really important that we are talking about the free things we offer, the paid things that we offer, how we help people, the problems that we solve, that we're talking about that in multiple places. We're doing it on our website. We're doing it on social media. We're doing it, within the sales funnel itself. And one of the big problems that I see people struggle with is that when they are creating that, free content on social media, they are not creating content that is attracting people who are actively experiencing the problem that they help people solve. Right. And so they're attracting these people where they're feeling like they have to convince them. Right. They're like, let me give an example. Let's say that you have a course on, vegan meal planning or something like that. You don't have to convince anyone to be a vegan. There are people out there looking on the internet every day. How do I, I'm a vegan. How do I meal plan? How do I like my kids are picky eaters. Like I'm going on a backpacking trip, whatever the different specific problems are, right? And so those people are out there. That is who the content that you're creating should be speaking to. Don't waste your time creating content on here's why being a vegan is great, because they already know being a vegan is great. When you're creating content like that, you're going to attract people who are not vegans, who are just like, I don't want to be a vegan. I don't want you to push that on me or whatever it is. And so you have to be really mindful of that, because when you're selling something, some people are going to say yes, some people are going to say no. And sometimes we become overly focused on the people that say no. And we we waste time creating content, doing all the things to overcome objections that are not our business to overcome, right? Example, if someone literally does not have the money to invest in your program, that is not an objection to overcome. They just don't have it right now, right? Now was not the right time for them. It doesn't mean they can't get value from your free content or whatever. But what I will say is that sometimes, people will tell you, it's out of my budget, or I just don't have the time. And they're saying that because they don't want to get into the details, because they want to let you down easy, because they don't want to say, well, actually, I think your course sounds great and it's going to help other people, but it's not going to help me because X, Y. They don't want to go down that road, right? And so they're just saying something easy, like, oh, it's just money's tight, whatever, right? And then you're like, okay, well, what if I slash the price in half? And they're like, well, money's still tight. It's like, okay. So that's not always the real issue. And the more that you can position your solution, your course, your method, your formula, your framework as unique and different, the more you are going to stand out for all of those people that are looking on the internet all day, all night, trying to solve their problem. They're actively spending money trying to solve their problem. They're buying other courses. They're hiring other coaches. They're doing other things. They're willing to make the time, right? They're willing to invest money. They just haven't found the right solution yet. Those are the people that you need to be speaking to.
This is so mind-blowing, because I think a lot of people don't realize that they're in the convincing stages or this phase of trying to convince versus talking to the people who have technically already said yes. They just need to know you exist.
Yeah. And they just need to know what makes you special, what makes your solution different from all the other stuff they've tried before. There's so many people out there.
That is awesome. I think a lot of people are going to be able to reflect on that and kind of shift their messaging right away. That's a very tangible suggestion. So thank you.
Yeah. And also focus and celebrate on the people who are enrolling, whether it's one person or two people or 200 people or whatever it is, and look at the commonalities now. Why are those people enrolling, right? Why are they telling you that? What made them really pull the trigger and get in there? What they're telling you, that's the message that you should lean into more of, right? Because those are the people that are seeing your offer and be like, wow, this is exactly what I need. And don't fall into the trap of focusing on what's not working, of focusing on the people that are not buying. Because when you're doing that, your messaging it starts to go left, basically.
For sure. It's interesting to think about, as you're talking. I'm thinking about website copy. I'm thinking about people who are on social media, going live, doing reels. And I have a lot of conversations with people right when they're launching the thing, whatever it is, the course, the product, the service. And they go, okay, we're ready. Like it's not necessarily like a launch per se, but it's that day where it becomes available. And the one action that people typically take is posting once on Instagram and saying, where are all the people I posted? So as a former and probably current social media marketing user, do you have any tips for how to properly use social media? And also let's just bust some myths about expectations and ways that we typically see people using this that might not be the best route.
So the first thing that I want to say again is there's more than one right way to do something, right? There are some people who sell courses who are very much a personal brand in that they're sharing photos of their kids on social media, of, they're going on vacation, they're doing this, that, the whatever, right? That's okay. But just because they're doing that doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. Right. And so if you prefer to focus more on the content side of things, of helping people kind of shift their beliefs, of educating people about the problems that they are experiencing, that kind of thing, that's okay too. And so I just want to say that outright, because when it comes to social media, a lot of times people don't post because they think it needs to be fancy, or they need to be in this really cool environment, or have lots of fancy tech equipment or whatever. And the reality is you just do not. Now, eventually you may get to those things, but you don't need them to start. You don't need them to make your first 6 figures, right? And I think that for a lot of people, they get overwhelmed because they're looking at what people are doing, people who already have a full-time team, who are able to post 3 times a day, 7 days a week, right? On multiple different channels, and tweak the content for each channel. And that's awesome. And that's great. But one person alone is not doing that. They have a team of people, and they didn't start doing that. Right. And so again, the important thing is to not get ahead of yourself, right? Focus on what needs to be done right now. Consistency is important, but you need to find a pace of consistency that's right for you. So I know for myself, I am not the person who is going to wake up each day and be like, okay, I'm ready to make my post on Instagram. I have to batch content, because if I do it the other way, I will post maybe once a month, right? And so there are people who will batch 90 days worth of content at a time, right? Or 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is. I am also not that person. So I'm good at batching 2 weeks worth, but then I'm just okay, I need to turn off. I'm actually done filming. I don't want to do this. And that's okay too. And so you really have to, to find a cadence that works for you, and to know that, when it comes to selling your course, one of the most important things that you as the CEO alone need to be accountable for is being visible. And I think that one of the reasons why I love having that automated funnel so much is because then you're not involved in the sales process. So then you have that time to spend on getting visible, on marketing, right? Like I didn't hire my first employee until after I was making $1 million. I did have like, a contractor here and there to help with different things, but my sales process was automated. Like I wasn't involved in that. And so my job as CEO was to show up and be visible. And I think what happens for some course creators is, they're showing up and being visible for a short period of time. They're not seeing the results they want, and then they're just quitting, right? And then a long period of time, then they'll start it again. But you have to have that extended consistency over time. And for me, the best way to set myself up for success is to batch content in advance, right? Whether it's like little 30-second videos of, helping people, whether it's a carousel, whatever kind of content it is. The point is batch it so that you don't have to be consistent, so that the system will be consistent for you, right?
Absolutely. I am so that girl who gets really excited and has like a session of creating content, and I'll post it and then you don't hear from me again for at least a month. What do you mean when you say
when you are being visible, you are being uncomfortable. You are getting outside of your comfort zone and putting your thoughts, your ideas out there, even if it means someone else might disagree with you. Right. And I think that a lot of times we say, oh, we're going to be visible, but we're being visible like inside of our comfort zone. So we're being visible like once a month on Instagram. And we're like, I am being visible. Like I posted last month. Did you not see my one post?
talking straight to me.
Yes. So we're being visible, but it's in our comfort zone. And the reality is, like, as trite as it sounds, all the growth is outside of your comfort zone, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But the cool thing is that it doesn't stay uncomfortable forever, right? It's just like building a new habit. So every 2 weeks, am I super amped and pumped to create, get in there and create some content? Sometimes, but not always. But even if I'm not pumped and excited, I know that by sitting down and making myself do it and be uncomfortable during that time, that's actually going to unlock a ton of freedom for me for the next 2 weeks. And so by focusing on the outcome and being like, okay, but then I can just do whatever for 2 weeks, then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to buckle down and, get this done. It's not always, you're not always operating in a state of constant, motivation and inspiration. There's plenty of times that I'm doing things that I'm like, this kind of blows or whatever. But I'm able to focus on, okay, well, what is the payoff of doing this? Like, what is it? Okay, yes, that is definitely worth it.
It's the question. What is the outcome that I'm seeking?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Beautiful. All right. I have to ask this because this is such a hot topic, no matter what we're talking about, but especially in the course world. Let's talk about pricing. And how do people price their courses? How do I know if this is a high ticket offer, a low ticket offer? Do I do a mini course? How much do I sell that for? Should I do a free course? This is a multifaceted topic and something we may not cover in full, but what are your thoughts on pricing?
So what I will say is that, you can make $1 million selling a 197 course. You can make $1 million selling a $20,000 course. You can make $1 million like any way possible, right? It's just finding out like what works for you. Each pricing structure, each business model is going to have pluses and minuses. So you got to find one where the pluses outweigh the minuses for you, right? Now, when I talk about selling on autopilot, people are typically, that's not going to be for a $20,000 course, right? Something like anything above $3,000 is going to require some kind of a sales call, right? Some kind of a sales call where you're able to get on the call with people, like answering more detailed questions, Those people are not going to, happen upon your post on Instagram, see that you're promoting your free masterclass, go to your free masterclass the next day, watch it, and buy during that masterclass a $20,000 program. Like, it's just, you're not going to be able to scale that way. And so pricing is important, and that you're being like realistic, right? The other thing that I will say is that pricing is a lot of the parts of pricing that people kind of forget about are, what is it actually going to cost you to deliver this product, right? And so, it's easy to be like, well, I just, I want to get a bunch of people in the door. So I'm going to sell, I just want to sell like a $97 course, or, whatever it is. So you can definitely do that, but if you're selling a $97 course and you are including weekly group coaching calls and lifetime access to a community and lifetime access to the content and da 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 da, and some one-on-one calls with you or whatever, like if you're putting all of these things in there, that might be sustainable if you have 2 clients, but what happens when you have 200 new clients a month, right? And that's not sustainable. And so it's really important to kind of to think about, not just what is it going to look like to be able to deliver this for, 5 people, but what is it going to look like to deliver this for a much larger group of people? And so you kind of want to think about, do I want to, some people are very adamant, for example, that they want to give access to the content for their course for a limited time, right? So like we give lifetime access to the content, but we do have a specific access period for the community. That's because the community requires my time, it requires my team's time. And so while it makes sense for us to be able to update the program and give people free access to the updates of the content, we can't do that if the community is just growing and growing and growing and growing, in terms of the team. And so that is something that people really need to think about, right? Can you sell a $200 course on autopilot? Yes. Can you sell a $2,000 course? Yes. But once you're really getting above that 3,000, it's not going to work. And so you need to really think about what you want to include in your offer and what you want to commit to, right? So like really think about it. Like you don't have, like I would suggest under offering, like, so if you're like, well, maybe it sounds like having a weekly Q&A sounds really cool. Okay, well, why don't you start with like twice a month Q&As? See how that goes. And over time, if you want to add more, you can, and that's fine. But like, kind of like, don't put in everything all at once first, because you can kind of find yourself in some sort of overwhelming situations. And so when it comes to pricing, so much of pricing is really about positioning, and choosing the price is choosing what pond you're going to compete in, right? So maybe you want to sell maybe you want to sell a $2,000 course, right? And so you're like, okay, yes, I want to sell a $2,000 course. Well, you need to be aware of other courses in your niche that are at around that same price point, because those are your competitors, right? If you're not able to offer necessarily the like additional things or whatever that's included at that price point, then maybe start at a $997 price point, right? Start at $1,000 or $500 or whatever it is. Start at something lower with something that you can deliver. And then as your business grows, as your team eventually grows, you have, more ability to support more people, then you can think about, raising your price and things like that. But like a lot of times people are kind of, they're either putting too much in their offers. So they're like, I'm going to sell a $197 course and I'm going to give everyone some one-on-ones and like all these different things. They're like stuffing it with like too much stuff, when if you look around in your market, nobody's doing that. And also you can't afford to do that. So, and then you also have to, realistically look at, okay, like if I want this price point, like, do I have the marketing skills to back up that price point? Right? Do I have or is that something that I want to work up to? Right? Is that one of my goals? Like maybe you're like, okay, you know what? I want to start selling my course at $500, but 12 months from now, I want to be selling it for $2,000. So we're going to start with 500. I'm going to gradually, get better. That is also totally fine. But pricing is such a personal decision, and it is such a loaded topic. You have to do something that stretches you a little bit outside of your comfort zone. but that you're also excited to do.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that people tend to kind of load things up from a perspective of like, if I'm going to ask for this much, I have to give them this much value.
Mhm.
And I have conversations with people quite often where it's rather than making the list longer, how can you provide a more well-rounded, excellent experience? Because to me, that's way more valuable than getting all the stuff that I'm only going to use one or two of the list of 20.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Awesome. Gosh, this is so full of incredible nuggets. Something that you said that kind of triggered a question for me is so let's say I have a course and I want to repurpose that course in different price points. So do you ever have people who sell the course itself for $197, but if you want to opt into coaching with the course, it's this, and is that a viable model?
Yeah, for sure it is. And the one thing that I will say is that when it comes to selling an evergreen funnel, the thing that you want to make sure that you're not doing is trying to sell a whole bunch of different offers in one single funnel, right? And so what I kind of tell people is, think about like what's a version of your course that you're excited about delivering. Maybe it's content and 8 weeks access to a community. Maybe it's content and a few bonuses. I don't know, whatever it is, right? So if that's what you are focused on selling inside of your funnel, you can always then offer various upgrades. So after they make the purchase, so in the funnel, they're just getting them to that buying decision for that one product. Once they do that, then maybe 2 weeks in, they get a short email sequence that is offering a one-on-one coaching package. That's going to be, 60 days, and they'll have access to you one-on-one for 60 days. And it complements what you're already selling. So you're not even needing to create new content. It's just a different level of support, right? You might think to yourself, oh, you know what? I'm going to, maybe you want to go the other direction and you're like, well, I want to sell this course I want the main offer that I'm selling to include, the coaching and the community and the content. You might then be like, so I think what I also want to do is offer a downsell with maybe like just the first module of the content, no coaching, no community, and sell it at a much lower price point for everyone who doesn't buy the main offer, right? And so there's so many, when you think about kind of upsells, downsells, cross sells, order bumps, there's so much opportunity. So, because a lot of times when I say inside of your funnel, you should be focused on selling one thing. A lot of times people think, does that mean I can only sell one thing like ever in my life? And no, you can always add to it over time. But I will also say too, is that, what I have seen some people do is actually broaden their product suite too much to the point where they are running so many different programs and they don't have a big team, but they're running lots of different programs because that's how they're making money, right? They're not growing their audience. They're selling to the same group of people over and over again by creating these different like new programs and things. And so if you're doing that, that is not really the best way. And oftentimes with those people, I see them once they do say, okay, well, for the next year, I am just going to be heads down focused on selling this one product. And then they're able to get traction on it because they're just really focusing on all their efforts on one main thing.
My gosh. Thank you. That is brilliant. Excellent advice. You have shared so much. I can't believe an hour has almost gone by. I can't wait to send this episode to so many people. And I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. You are in such a really necessary niche and position to help people with all of these great ideas and ways to serve who are just kind of sitting there frustrated, and there's just little tweaks that I think they're almost there. And to know that you're here as a resource for them is reassuring for me to know that there's hope for these people to get their products and services and courses out into the world. And yeah, I truly want to thank you for creating this space.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. How can people learn more about you? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
So I do have a free masterclass. It's called How to Generate Launch-Sized Revenue Without Launching. So if you have a course that you want to sell on autopilot, or if you've been thinking about starting a course soon, you definitely want to sign up for this free class. You can do so at CaitlinBacher.com @Pualena.com/masterclass. And in terms of, social media, really the best place to reach out or to chat with me is on Instagram. That's the platform where I'm most available.
Fantastic. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for sharing so openly with our listeners. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much.